13.8 billion years ago, there was nothing. No stars, no atoms, no planets, no light, no time, no space. And then, in a fraction of a second, smaller than any measurement we have words for, everything exploded into existence. Not an explosion in space, but an explosion of space itself. We call it the Big Bang. And whether you find it that terrifying or beautiful, that moment is the reason you exist, the reason everything exists. And the story of how we went from a single, incomprehensible flash to you sitting there right now, capable of understanding it. The greatest story ever told. For the first 380,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe was too hot for light to travel. It was a fog, a soup of energy and particles screaming at each other. Then it cooled. Electrons bonded with protons, atoms formed for the first time, and light, actual light, was released. That light still exists today. We call it the cosmic microwave background. When you see static on an old TV, roughly 1% of that noise is the radiation from the birth of the universe. You have been watching the echo of creation your whole life and you never knew it. Then came the stars. Hydrogen and helium collapsed under gravity, heated up and ignited, and the first stars blazed to life. These weren't gentle like our sun. They were massive, hundreds of times larger, and burned fast and furious. When they died, they exploded as supernovas, hurling the heavier elements they forged: carbon, oxygen, iron, and gold across the cosmos. Carl Sagan famously said, "We are made of star stuff." He wasn't being poetic, he was being precise. Every atom of calcium in your bones, every atom of iron in your blood was forged inside a dying star billions of years before Earth existed. You are literally the universe looking at itself. About 4.6 billion years ago, in an unremarkable corner of the Milky Way galaxy, a cloud of gas and dust started collapsing. It formed a star, our sun, and the leftover debris began clumping together. One of those clumps became our Earth. But here's the thing about early Earth. It was hell. Constant meteor bombardment, oceans of molten rock, no oxygen, no ozone layer. The sky would have looked orange, not blue. And yet, life found a way. Just 300 to 500 million years after the Earth formed, geologically immediately, the first single-celled life appeared in the oceans. Nobody fully understands how, but it happened. And for the next 3 billion years, life stayed simple. Bacteria, microbes, nothing major. Then, about 540 million years ago, something extraordinary happened. The Cambrian explosion. Life suddenly diversified at an almost incomprehensible rate. Ice appeared, predators appeared, complex nervous systems appeared. In geological terms, it happened in a blink of an eye. Evolution had found its rhythm, and it wasn't stopping. Dinosaurs ruled for 165 million years. They were extraordinary, the most successful large animals in Earth's history. And then, 66 million years ago, a rock, roughly 12 kilometers wide, came screaming out of space and hit what is now Mexico at 20 kilometers per second. The impact released energy equivalent to over 1 billion nuclear bombs. The sky went dark. The food chain collapsed. 75% of all species on Earth went extinct. But some small, warm-blooded creatures survived this chaos. The mammals. Over the next 66 million years, they diversified, evolved, and eventually, about 300,000 years ago, one species stood up, looked at the sky, and asked, why? Homo sapiens, us. We didn't survive because we were the strongest. We survived because we could cooperate at scale, share knowledge across generations, and imagine things that didn't exist yet. Our weapon wasn't the teeth or claws. It was the idea. For most of the human history, knowledge moved at the speed of walking. A discovery made in China might take centuries to reach Europe. Then, in 1440, Johannes Gutenberg introduced a movable type printing press, and everything changed. Suddenly, ideas could travel, books could be copied, knowledge could scale. Within 50 years of the printing press, more books were printed than produced in the entire previous 1,000 years combined. the scientific revolution ignited. Copernicus said Earth moves around the sun, not the other way. Galileo pointed the telescope at the sky. Newton described the laws of gravity with mathematics. The universe was no longer a mystery to accept. It was a puzzle to solve. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Steam power, electricity, the internal combustion engine. In the span of roughly 200 years, humanity went from horse-drawn carts to airplanes, from candles to electric cities, from letters taking months to instant communication across the globe. The pace of change didn't slow down, it compounded. October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched a metal sphere about the size of a beach ball into orbit. It beeped, it did nothing else. But that beep, heard by the radio operators around the world, announced something that had never happened in the 4.6 billion years of the Earth's history. A human-made object had left the planet. Sputnik. 12 years later, on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped on the surface of the moon and said those famous words.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But here's what most people didn't think about. The computer that guided Apollo 11 to the moon had less processing power than a modern USB stick. We went to the moon on a hardware less powerful than your car's key fob. And then, from the technology developed from the space race, something even more transformative emerged: the internet. What started as a military communication network became the central nervous system of the human civilization. By 2024, over 5 billion people were connected. Every piece of accumulated human knowledge accessible in seconds from anywhere in the planet. That has never happened before in the 13.8 billion year history of the universe. Right now, as you listen to this, something remarkable is happening. We have telescopes in the space, like the James Webb telescope, staring at galaxies that existed just a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. We are watching the early universe with our own eyes. We are editing DNA with tools like CRISPR, potentially ending genetic diseases that have tormented humanity for millennia. We are building artificial intelligence systems that can learn, reason, and create. Tools that may compress decades of scientific progress into years. We are planning to return to the moon and then go further, Mars and beyond. For the first time in human history, we are a species that could choose to become multi-planetary. The universe that created us in an explosion 13.8 billion years ago may one day be explored by the same beings that it accidentally made. Here's what strikes me most about all this. Every empire that ever rose fell. Every civilization that seemed permanent crumbled. The Roman Empire gone. The great libraries of Alexandria burned. Languages, cultures, entire ways of life lost. But knowledge survived. Science survived. Curiosity survived. Because it lives not in buildings or borders, but in minds. And every generation that asks why, that points a telescope at the unknown, that refuses to accept. That's just how it is. They add another page to the greatest story ever written. The story of a universe that created beings capable of understanding themselves. You are not bystanders in the story. You are made up of the same atoms that created the first stars. You carry the memory of every ancestor who survived the impossible odds to exist. And you live in the most extraordinary moment of the 13.8 billion year history of the cosmos. What do you do with that? That's the next chapter.